Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the highly anticipated follow-up to the incredible Into the Spider-Verse that we got back in 2018. And I really do love that first movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time at this point. It is incredibly rewatchable, and going into the second movie, your expectations are so sky high, and especially with all the reviews that you've probably already seen at this point, which is really just hyping up this movie even higher than that hype was already at. Does it live up to that potential? And I can absolutely say with a resounding yes, it does. I absolutely loved this movie. It's my favorite of the year, and I cannot wait to talk about all the details in this movie in full spoiler fashion. So if you've not seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I think if you are watching this review, you probably watched it opening night with all the loud crowd just screaming and cheering at every single surprising moment in this movie. So if you have seen the movie, don't ruin it for anybody else. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. It's a big recommend from me. Let's just get into spoilers. So what is this movie about? Well, essentially it takes place a little bit over a year after the events of the first one. And if you watch the post-credit scene of that first movie, you know that Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099, is essentially creating this interconnected web of different multiverses to create a team of Spider-Men that will protect all these different universes from absolute catastrophe and different incursions that can happen if things happen that aren't supposed to happen in any given universe. This movie follows characters like Gwen Stacy or Peter B. Parker or Miles Morales, who is of course the main character in this series that's exploring this multiverse of spider people for the first time, going across all these different universes to see exactly what is going on. And it also has the main villain called Spots, this very unique guy that has just a bunch of spots all over his body that can essentially teleport, him from one place to another, or in this movie's case from one universe to another, making this guy a really huge multiversal threat, which I find this villain extremely interesting, especially kind of the revelations that you get with this character and his backstory and how he's connected to Miles Morales, which I think is very funny. But that is essentially the basic premise of this movie. So the first thing I want to talk about this film is how the meta commentary on Spider-Man is so incredible in this film. I think that is the strength of these Spider-Verse movies, is because they're built off of the mountain of Spider-Man movies that we've already had. We've had maybe like 13, maybe 14 Spider-Man movies at this point, and if you include the video games in it as well, there's so many Spider-Man stories to be told and to be seen on any sort of media, whether it's video game, TV, movie, whatever it is. And so we deeply know the story of Spider-Man. There's hardly any stone left unturned when it comes to the characterizations of all these spider people, all the tropes involved in the backstories, and the tropes of how they are always dealt with the worst possible things that can possibly happen to them, and how they can't save everybody. And so we deeply know the story of Spider-Man. They use it so brilliantly in this movie to defy all expectations. And I think that is what the character of Miles Morales really stands for. He is breaking the mold of Spider-Man in a lot of ways. And this movie really is about Miles Morales trying to save his father from a canon event, which in this universe, or I guess in this series, a canon event is essentially the Uncle Bens of the world, the in Gwen Stacy's case, the Peter Parkers of the world that die, that make them who they are, that make them the hero that they are. And so in this case, Miles Morales figures out that his father will die in one of these canon events in a couple days. And yes, even though I did say there's hardly any stone left unturned when it comes to the character of Spider-Man to explore, this movie happens to just explore so many of those stones that was still left unturned. This movie is so original, so unique in that meta commentary, using what we know about Spider-Man against the audience itself to defy expectations, is absolutely brilliant. So let's get into all the characters in this movie, starting off with Gwen Stacy, because the movie also starts off focusing on Gwen Stacy's character. We get to see a more fleshed out version of the introduction of her that we got to see glimpses of in the first movie, her origins essentially following the whole Peter Parker Lizard storyline, and how tragic that loss is for her. That canon event defines her character, and how she is so afraid of losing anybody else. She's deathly afraid of her father figuring out her identity, because she doesn't want to lose him, because he is all that she has left. We also get to see exactly why Miles Morales means so much to her, in her also missing Miles, also wanting to go out and reach out to him in any sort of way, because she wasn't able to make any connection with anybody else besides him. And so you get to find out what these relationships mean to all the decisions that she makes throughout this entire movie, and she gets put in some very tough situations. I loved her introduction to the Spider-Verse, with Miguel O'Hara and Jessica Drew showing up to fight the Vulture, who has popped up from a different universe into her own. And so they get a lot of great banter, a lot of great action. This style of her universe is absolutely beautiful. But again, that relationship with her father is the most important, because she has to reveal her identity to her father in this moment with all the things going on in this situation. And that's very much changes her entire path, because I think her storyline was leading into a way where her father would die in a tragic canon event later on, but because of the events that happened with her revealing herself to her father, and her father kind of having to rethink her life, and Gwen, disappearing into the multiverse because she doesn't want to deal with the consequences of her revealing herself to her father, she's trying to push that back and push that aside for as long as possible until she can finally, deal with it herself, because she's not ready to confront this consequence that she's going to have. And I think this is a very smart thing to do as well, because like I said, she has to make a lot of tough decisions. Once she meets Miles in this movie, she's trying to not to tell Miles exactly why he is so important and why he can't be a part of this, Spider-Man multiversal team that is protecting all these different universes, because he himself was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to happen. That spider that bit Miles Morales was from a different universe that glitched in, and it's another one of those details that's in that first movie that, you don't really think about, but now that it has a greater context of a sequel, and you see that spider glitching out like it was in the wrong universe in that first movie, it was all there. All those pieces were there in that first film. It finally clicks together in this one. It's a brilliant way to continue that storyline, to reference that first movie and kind of retroactively making you look back at that first film and seeing all these seeds that were planted for the second one. And of course, you were introduced to some other Spider people in this movie, including Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man 2099. And I think if I have any complaints about this movie, it's the fact that we didn't get nearly enough of Oscar Isaac when compared to the trailer. I was expecting him to be in this movie a little bit more than he was, but he was still in it a very good amount. By the time you get to him, it's about halfway through the movie, and so I just wanted a lot more of Oscar Isaac in this role, because he was so engaging with his voice performance. And I think a lot of actors don't give their all when it comes to voice performances, but Oscar Isaac gave 150% of his efforts into making this character pop off the screen and making him as engaging of a character as possible. And his backstory and everything that he has, his motives, are also really great too. Like every other Spider person in this movie, Miguel has lost people before. He lost his daughter, and he so desperately wants to be in a world where he died instead and his daughter is still alive, and he can replace himself essentially in this world, but it of course caused an incursion event and he lost his daughter for a second time. So he's a very jaded character. He's a character that so desperately wants things to go the way that they're supposed to for these Spider people. He can't accept the fact that Miles will be able to save somebody that he's supposed to lose in the eyes of this algorithm that he created to essentially create the paths for all these different Spider people. And he's a great antagonist for this film, even though he is right in some ways. And when it comes to all the decisions that characters make in this movie, there's a reason behind all of them. You can get behind any sort of ideology. You can understand why Spider-Gwen kept all these secrets away from Miles. How do you tell him that he was a mistake? And that is all these characters, and even Peter B. Parker also not knowing how to tell him that, making the decision not to visit Miles, even though they had the ability to visit him much sooner than they did in this movie. There's so many decisions that these characters have to make throughout this entire film that you can get behind all of them, even though some of them might be frustrating and make you, not like these decisions that these characters make, even though they all feel very real and human and flawed. And to rattle off some of the other Spider people that you get to see in this movie, you get to see Jessica Drew, who is another Spider-Woman who rides a motorcycle, who's really cool to see in this movie. And I just liked her presence in this movie, and her, I guess, sort of turning off of the side of Miguel O'Hara throughout the movie. And I think that she's going to be a really strong asset to Gwen and Miles Morales and Peter B. Parker later on in the second film. I just think that she's a very interesting character because of her stance of sticking with Miguel O'Hara for the large majority of this movie, but to see that turn possibly for the second film really makes me excited to see what this character does. You also get a lot of Spider-Punk, who is voiced by Daniel Kaluuya in this movie, and I absolutely loved this character. The whole, tearing down the establishment, the character that doesn't like the rules of society, that doesn't like this, Spider society that has been created by Miguel O'Hara, and he doesn't really have the means to tear it down himself. Miles Morales has a lot more guts to be able to do that himself, but he is an ally for these characters, and he's a great person to have on their side because he's just a really fun character, and his style as well, the art style with his drawing. I want to see his universe too, because I bet his universe is really cool and stylized, but just to see how he looks almost like paper cutouts throughout this entire movie is really fun to see as well. Spider-Man India also has a very strong presence in this movie, who is voiced by Dopinder from Deadpool, which I love that fact that actor is voicing this character, and he is a very important character in this movie because he is the means to explain to Miles what a canon event is, and because of Miles Miles's, interference in this situation, it causes this canon event to not happen, which maybe will cause the collapse of his entire universe. And you get to see those stakes built in this entire sequence. This style of his universe was great. The personality that this character has when he's explaining his backstory in a very, let's do this one more time sort of way that the first Spider-Man movie did really well. I really love this character, and I really am happy for him that he got to save both people. He got to do both things, but what is going to happen to his universe is still very much in peril, and all these spider people that showed up at the end of this sequence might be able to save it from complete and utter collapse, but who knows what's going to happen. Has Miles entirely ruined the situation, or can you do both? Can you save everybody and be happy in your life as a spider person? And I think that is the question that this movie begs, and I really hope we get an answer to that in the second film. And I also really did like Spider-Byte in this movie. She's kind of a smaller character, but I love the fact that she's just kind of sitting at home in her own universe, and she's kind of using VR to connect herself to Miguel O'Hara's essentially guy in a chair role, where she's, working with all the computers, sending all these villains back to the universes that they belong to. And there's a great moment with her character when Miles escapes all these spider people, that great chase sequence, which I'll get into in a second here. But at the end of that sequence, once Miles is trying to go home and Miguel is trying to tear apart that thing to get to him at the very last second, and he looks over at Spider-Byte, and she has the ability to stop this from happening, but instead she decides to send him home. And I think I was confused the fact that, since there is a twist that he was not sent to his universe and he was sent to the original universe that the spider came from, and there's that whole crazy ending that they have with that entire thing. I thought for a second that it was intentional, that she was still a villain on Miguel's side, but the fact that she's with the spider team at the end of this movie that's supposed to help save Miles, I do think that she genuinely wanted him to go home and have a chance to save his father, and so I also do find this character extremely interesting. But let's of course get back to our main character of this movie being Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore. And again, all the voice performances in this movie, whether it's Hailee Steinfeld or Oscar Isaac or even Daniel Kaluuya, all of them give their all to these voice performances, and I just love all of these characters and how they all are defining their personality, their swing styles. Miles is much more of a, improvisational swinger. He's more, loose when he does all his movements, and he's very entertaining to watch in every single sequence, versus somebody like Miguel O'Hara, who's very, tactical with all his moves, or somebody like Gwen, who's very, angelic about all her moves. She's a ballerina, so she has all these different styles that she uses in her swinging and in her fight sequences in this movie. And Miles, of course, is such an engaging character from that first movie, breaking the mold of what a Spider-Man can be and trying to forge his own path in this multiverse. And so I always found this character very interesting. But what I loved about this movie was, of course, the family dynamics. And another thing that I haven't mentioned yet in this review is the fact that this movie does take its time to have very great character-based dialogue scenes. That's, it's a very fast-paced and frenetic movie like the first Spider-Verse movie was, but it has time to have conversations between Miles and his mother, for instance, which is a beautiful scene where she told him that he can go and seek out Gwen and then go do his own thing, essentially ungrounding him and letting him go off and do all his adventures in this movie. And I love the fact that Miles wanted to reveal his identity to her by the end of the film, but of course it was the wrong universe, the wrong mother, and the wrong situation to try to do that for. And so Miles does go through an entire arc where he does feel open enough to explain himself to his parents, but it just wasn't the right situation, unfortunately. And so I love his arc in this film, and I love that dynamic and that idea that Miles just wants to go off on his own, and his parents just are too afraid to let him go. And of course that's a very universal theme. It's a theme that I relate to a lot in this movie. And of course there's that idea that Miles Morales knows that his canon event is coming up. He knows that his father is going to die tragically in the fight against the Spots in the second movie, and so what are you going to do if you're Peter Parker and you know that Uncle Ben is going to die? Aren't you going to do everything in your power to try to stop that from happening? I think that's something that's Gwen, kind of relates to by the ending of this movie. It's something that's Peter B. Parker kind of, reflects on and thinks like, yeah, maybe I would. Even Spider-Byte was like, yes, go try to save your father. And so this idea that he is trying to be able to stop the thing that we're so used to seeing in these Spider-Man movies, which I think will have one of two different outcomes. Of course, it could either be the classic storyline where maybe he does save his dad, maybe he does get away with it, but then realizes that it wasn't the right decision, things start to collapse, and he makes things worse by doing this, and then he decides to, be more selfless and try to save the multiverse rather than be selfish and save his own father. That's the more general trope that I think they could go down the route of. And I don't want them to go that route. I want him to be able to actually save his father, to forge his own path, and to break the mold of what it means to be Spider-Man, and to be able to save people and, save the world at the same time, be selfish and selfless. It's something that maybe you can do. Maybe he can be a different type of Spider-Man by doing that in that second film, and I really hope it goes in in that direction because I think, for one, it'd be different for a Spider-Man movie, but I think that would be more interesting for Miles' character in general and for Miguel's character in general to be able to see that it is possible to be able to do both and for him to let loose and to not be as, imposing when it comes to everything. It needs to be exactly his way. He needs to be able to let people die to save the universe. And I just think that's, you don't trade lives. You try to save everybody that you can. And I really hope it does go in that direction for the second film. And of course, there is the Spot voiced by Jason Schwartzman in this movie. And he is so incredibly funny and also very intimidating in this movie all at the same time. If you saw the clip that they released online a few days ago of the convenience store robbing the ATM, it is an incredibly funny sequence. You get to see his powers, and the showcase of his abilities is very entertaining in a fun way where the bread is falling out of his stomach. It's all great, but when he needs to be intense and threatening and needs to be scary, he is genuinely a very scary Spider-Man villain. Even though you don't get to see the fight is going to be between Miles Morales and the Spots by the end of the second film, which I thought you were going to see that at the end of this film, you do not get to see that. You get a heavy Spots, focus for the first half of the movie, and you get to see him in bits and pieces in the second half of the movie. Again, it's one of those characters that I wish I got to see a lot more of, like Miguel O'Hara, because he was so engaging in this movie. And the greatest retcon of all time also happens in this movie, and that's the fact that the Spot is the bagel guy. He was at the collider when it exploded, and all those spots that you get to see, that visual language that they had for the multiverse breaking open in that first movie is what gave him his abilities. And he's kind of going off across to all the Alchemex, facilities across the multiverse, and he's stealing all his power to be able to build himself up to be a worthy, nemesis for Miles Morales, because the running joke in this movie is the fact that Miles said he's a villain of the week, and that really hit him personally. He doesn't want to be a villain of the week. He wants to be the main nemesis for this character that is going to kill his father. He's going to cause that canon event, and this character is just so entertaining, and I cannot wait to see that final confrontation, that final fight, once he's built up to full power. What is that going to visually look like? Because they tease it a little bit in these visions that Miles has for the future that looks extremely fun and extremely, beautiful with the animation. I cannot wait to see that in fruition in the second film. And of course, there is that cliffhanger ending that they have in this movie that is just absolutely great. I love the fact that they ended the movie where they did, because of course, Spider-Byte sent him to his home universe, and I honestly can't believe that I missed it, because it even said on screen that he was going to Earth 42, and because they always say, the Earth numbers whenever they're going from universe to universe, and that his universe number, I think, is like 1610 or something like that. His Earth is not Earth 42 where that spider came from, and I just can't believe I didn't catch that. I didn't clock that the first time watching this movie. The fact that it literally told you he was being sent to the wrong universe, and it just still goes over your head, and it's still extremely shocking when you find out that after Miles, essentially reveals himself to his mother, saying that he is Spider-Man, she doesn't know who Spider-Man is, because this universe doesn't have a Spider-Man, because that spider was glitched out into Miles' universe. The blonde Peter Parker at the beginning of Into the Spider-Verse was not supposed to die. Miles, interfered in this situation, and he wasn't supposed to be bit by the spider, and he was genuinely a mistake. So now this other universe doesn't have a Spider-Man, so Miles is like the Prowler in this universe. His uncle is still alive, but his father is dead in this universe, and Miles is stuck in a very tight situation where he now has to face against himself, which I think you're going to have a lot of thematic elements of Miles. It's another great trope in movies where you have to face yourself before you can fully grow as a character, and I think that's what they're going to do in the next film. And of course, you get to see Gwen also learn a lot of things. She goes back to her father, and he kind of accepts her, and he decides to not be a captain anymore, and it's because of that interference with all these spider people that possibly stopped that canon event from happening to Spider-Gwen, because he's not going to become captain, so that means he's safe, because apparently if you're an uncle or if you're a captain in a Spider-Man world, you're just bound to die. So now that we have a new group that are on Team Morales, where you have Spider-Gwen, you have Peter B. Parker, I think you had Spider-Man India in there, you of course had all the characters from the first movie. You had Penny Parker, you had Spider-Man Noir, I think Spider-Ham was there as well. Did I mention Spider-Byte? I don't remember exactly what the team is at the end of the movie, and I think that Jessica Drew will eventually join this group against Miguel O'Hara. But then you have the whole Miguel O'Hara group, where you have Scarlet Spider, and you have Spider-Punk was also with the other group. But then you have Spider-Man. There's so many Spider-Man in this movie. It's kind of hard to keep track of it. You have Scarlet Spider on the team of Miguel O'Hara. Of course, you have Miguel O'Hara, Jessica Drew, and a few others. Of course, the multiverse of all of them chasing him in that beautiful chase sequence that you got to see teased in the trailer, which is even more glorious in the actual movie than it was in the trailer. So I loved this movie. I loved where they ended it. And yes, this movie is not a complete film. I think there's going to be some people that don't like the fact that the storylines and the character arcs don't finish in this movie. If anything, Spider-Gwen's character arc is complete in this movie versus Miles Morales' character. His arc does not complete in this film, but it does feel like half a story, and so I can only judge it as half a story. In terms of this first half of this story, this darker turn that it takes in that cliffhanger that it leaves you off on, it makes you want to get the second movie immediately. I cannot wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse. And also, there's no post-credit scene in this movie, so the movie that you get is what you get, and you don't get anything else teased after that. And of course, I think Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out March of next year, so I'm glad that it's very soon. It's not like we have to wait another 5 years for that film. And just bravo to all the filmmakers, to the writers, to the animators, to all the different styles and the direction that the directors had. Like I said in my letterbox, which if you haven't followed my letterbox, it's in the description down below, but when I rewatched the first movie, I said that every single frame of that movie is in service to the character of Miles Morales and his character arc and his growth, and the every single stylistic choice, whether it's the, you know, animating on ones or twos, is in service of this character's journey. And that's exactly what this movie does, but instead of just for Miles Morales, it's in service to every single character in their style and what it looks like. Even when Spider-Gwen is, you know, connecting with her father, her surroundings turn like a pinkish warm color, and when it's, you know, more tense, it turns to like a more blue color. And so every single stylistic choice is so beautifully done, making this movie truly one of the most beautiful animated movies of all time. And so that's where I'm going to wrap up my thoughts on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I'm going to pass it off to you guys down in the comments down below. What do you guys think of this movie? And also, what do you guys think about all the cameos in this movie? Were your crowd reactions, you know, incredibly excited about all the reveals, like Donald Glover playing a live-action Prowler in this movie, playing an Uncle Aaron in this version? I do think if they ever cross over the animated characters in Spider-Verse with the live-action characters with either Tom Holland or Andrew Garfield, I like the idea that, you know, Shameik Moore's character will stay animated the entire time. He will stay animated talking to a live action person, because it'd be weird if they recast this character as a live action Miles Morales, even though it is, you know, this same Shameik Moore character. If they're going to do a live action Miles Morales, which it seems like they are going to do possibly in the MCU, I hope it's a different version of this character, different variants, because I love this version so much, and I hope that this character gets to interact with the live action ones while still staying animated. So thanks everybody for watching this review. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you guys, like I said, comment down below, leave a like, and also subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I did a review for the Boogeyman as well in tandem with this review, so I'll have that up either the next day or at the same day that I upload this one, for maybe the next day, because I need time to edit both of these. And I also did enjoy that movie for the most part as well, so definitely subscribe to see more thoughts on movies in the future as well. So thanks everybody for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one.